Cold and indifferent female lead of the CEO of the Great Beauty, rebellious and flamboyant male lead of the Young Master, racing driver plus 1v1 plus sweet pet plus double cleanliness+Chasing wife, crematorium. After 3 years of hidden marriage in a commercial alliance, the young master of the merchant worked in heaven and earth. Jiang Li was blind and deaf, obedient to the orders of the merchant while wholeheartedly pursuing his career. Until Shanglu was so skilled that his rumor about his relationship with the newly recruited Xiaohua went viral and caught Jiang Li's eye. Jiang Li made a decisive decision and proposed a divorce. It was only then that Shanglu realized that his wife, Mrs. Xiaolu, was frequently courted by people and had an unforgettable ex Bai Yueguang in her heart. And he seems to be the substitute for the white moonlight. The reason for getting divorced is also to reunite with that white moonlight. The young master's anger cannot be exposed. Divorce. Think beautifully. Breaking the mirror and reuniting. Haha. From then on, the young master's daily routine, apart from racing and chasing his wife, was to single-handedly challenge his rival in love and show off his love crazily. Young master. How can my wife reconcile with others? Where has Mrs. Xiaolu gone? Super talk has been frequently pushed on hot searches, and Jiang Li has been pushed into the center of online bullying as a result. Netizen. Where did Mrs. Xiaolu, a wild chicken from, deserve our brother Xiaolu? Later, someone uncovered that the rumored Mrs. Xiaolu was actually Jiang Li, the CEO of the Jiang Group. People are beautiful, money is abundant, status is high, and public opinion instantly reverses 180 degrees. Netizen. Sister. Meal. Hungry. Look at me. Netizen. I admit that I spoke a little louder than before. Some even criticized the young master for eating soft food. The young master felt at ease about this. His teeth are not good, what's wrong with eating some soft rice? Keywords of the novel. What kind of bad thoughts can a double male lead have? No pop-ups, what kind of bad thoughts can a double male lead have? Download the full text, what kind of bad thoughts can a double male lead have? Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. She wants to announce officially. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. She wants to announce officially, doodle doodle. After the 59th vibration of her phone, Jiang Li couldn't help but raise her hand and rub her forehead. She explained to Assistant Zhou and walked out of the conference room holding her phone. The phone was called from Shanglu, but after connecting, no one could hear anyone except for the noisy heavy metal music. Jiang Li felt even more headache, so he spoke with a good temper, Shanglu. Speak up. Jiang. Leave. Finally, there came a clear young boy's voice over there. Although he had a big tongue, he still remained arrogant and said, "Why don't you answer the phone?" In a meeting. Jiang Li leaned against the granite railing in front of the corridor, his repaired fingers tapping lightly on the narrow stone surface. His gaze crossed the small garden in the courtyard and landed on a person. That person was wearing a light gray suit, with his back facing Jiang Li, and his figure was slender, overlapping with a figure in his memory. She couldn't help but pause the movements of her hands as she could see her spirit. Pei Xingyan, is that him? But this idea was quickly rejected by her, he couldn't be here. Jiang Li. Did you hear me speaking? The displeased voice of Shanglu in her ear suddenly pulled her thoughts back, and Jiang Li then withdrew his gaze with a faint expression. What did you just say? I said. You come pick me up and go home. Shanglu sneered, probably drunk, with a slightly intoxicated voice and a hook in the ending that could penetrate the phone and make her ears tingle. Jiang Li could imagine that when he said this, he should lazily lean back, with one leg stacked on the other. Fingers with distinct joints held a tall cup and casually took a sip, unable to conceal their innate nobility and arrogance in every move. On the delicate facial features, perhaps swaying lights will illuminate, making the usual carefree smile even brighter. He seemed confident that she would always obey him. Although the two have been married for 3 years, it is still a commercial alliance, and each party takes what they need. It is reasonable that the water in the well does not flow into the river. But the young master of this Kyoto merchant, who weighs 140 pounds, is born to be a troublemaker. He weighs 130 pounds just because of his bones. Either threatening her to take care of him with the power of the merchant today, or tomorrow shouting and yelling in front of her friends, making her unable to stand down everywhere. Everything is as one pleases, no matter how one responds or how Jiang Li comes. Jiang Li raised his hand and pinched the center of his eyebrows, pinching 2 shallow crescent marks on his fair skin. His tone was light, "Send me the address, I'll have Uncle Chi pick you up." Jiang Li. The young master recited her name word by word, with a long-tail tone and a teasing tone with an imperceptible sense of danger. "Don't let me say it again," he said. Even through the phone, she could feel his gaze piercing through, like a knife hanging from the top of her hair. Later, there was a clanging sound of glasses colliding with each other, accompanied by a burst of playful laughter. "Oh Brother Lu, you can't do this. Why can't you even call someone over? Did you offend my sister? Law again. TSK, Brother Lu, be careful not to even enter the door when you go back tonight. Go on the side." Shanglu laughed and cursed, followed by a clang, and the noisy music and chaotic commotion disappeared instantly. Jiang centrifuged and it became clear. "I think it's because the young master drank alcohol and then made a bet on her with others." If in the past, knowing it was a trap, Jiang Li would have let go of the matter at hand and rushed over early. Just today, Jiang Li couldn't help but look up at the corridor across from her. The person turned around and met her with 4 eyes. Jiang Li's heart skipped a beat and he quickly turned his face away. What else was to be said on the other end of the phone, and Jiang Li didn't have the heart to listen. He quickly hung up the phone and walked downstairs. The phone in hand made another vibration sound. Shanglu began WeChat bombing. Jiang Li felt his eyes turn black, and he used his toes to figure out how angry the young master on the other end of the phone was, how his smile should be, and how to shake his face with her when he returned home. But everyone has already provoked it, why not provoke the whole thing? He doesn't like what she does around him. With this thought in mind, Jiang Li felt that it was not a big deal for Shanglu to be angry, so he easily put him on the blacklist. Coincidentally, she came home early this morning and took some mung beans for a ride. Mao Do was an Alaskan pet that she had been raising since middle school. Now she is very tall, and when she saw Jiang Li, she snorted and threw her tail into a propeller. Following behind it, there was also the white lion cat raised by Shanglu, probing its head and mind. Shanglu didn't like dogs and repeatedly threatened Jiang Li to send the edamame away without success. He then bought a lion cat from a friend at a high price and named it Cheese Sauce, which sounds pungent and infuriating Jiang. Because Jiang Li is afraid of cats. But the young master is busy with various competitions all day long, so where does he have the leisure time to serve the cat as a defecator? Over time, this task fell on Jiang Li again. Jiang Li carefully introduced the cheese sauce into the cat bag and put a mouthpiece on the edamame. As soon as he closed the door, he received a hot search link. It was sent by Xie Yun, the agent of Song Shu. Song Shu is an artist signed by Jiang Li Company. He is good-looking, has strong business skills, and is resistant to competition. He quickly became popular upon his debut, and won the position of Best Actress through a film called For the Cloud. He is a legitimate star in the entertainment industry. Jiang Li clicked in to take a look, and the 4 big characters Song Shu Shanglu on the list were followed by a explosive character. The cause was a Weibo post posted by Song Shu, which featured a post on Shanglu with the caption, "I have you for the rest of my life, please give me more guidance." The picture shows 2 hands placed flat together, with the index finger and thumb overlapping at the center. One hand is slender and fair, well maintained, while the other hand has a wide and thick palm, slender fingers, and distinct joints, which can be vaguely judged. The owner of the hand should have an excellent appearance. Both ring fingers are adorned with a ring, which is simple in design but exudes luxury. It's clearly a pair. She looked down again at the identical wedding ring on her left ring finger. Without any accidents, she was turned green. Green as bright as white. Jiang, look, Song Shu suddenly posted a Weibo message without saying a word. Now that her private message has been blocked, how should we handle it? What does Song Shu mean? The message the other party is typing on the chat interface flickered again and again, and Xingyan replied. She wants to make an official announcement. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Car Accidents. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Car Accidents. The words, official announcement, hurt Jiang Li's eyes. She clicked back on the Weibo post and flipped it down. The unanimous blessings of 999, perfect match, made her feel excited. This is not the first time that there has been a scandal in Shanglu. The extremely high appearance of Shanglu, as a racing driver, quickly gained popularity, followed by endless scandals. However, each time it was a trap by paparazzi marketing accounts, unable to provide any solid evidence, and coupled with the fact that Shanglu had never responded directly, Jiang Li has been deceiving himself and pretending to turn a blind eye. Just today, one comment after another of perfect match made her feel that she really needs to come to an end with Shanglu. She has no NTR fetish, let alone the idea of being a third party. Contact the public relations department and get things sorted out as soon as possible. As for Song Shu, I remember when I signed the contract, there was a contract that stated that she would stay single during the contract renewal period. If she didn't want to do it anymore, let her come to me to terminate the contract. Song Shu is a legitimate celebrity, but Huaxing Group does not lack her as an artist. Jiang Li's Hun opened the car door and placed the cat bag on the passenger seat, then went to pull the rear door. Mao Dou tilted his head and rubbed the back of her hand before jumping onto the car. Woo! Stepping on the gas pedal, Qian sped out. Jiang Li parked on Binhai Road, and as soon as he opened the car door, Mao Dou was like an arrow that had taken off its bow, shuddering, and disappeared without a trace. She also picked up the cat bag and chose a clean place by the seaside to put out the cheese sauce. Cheese sauce still had a stinky face, half a glance generously giving to Jiang Li, just burying his head in pursuit of the little crab. Just like its unconventional master. Although it is dusk, the sun is still very sunny. Jiang Li chose a shaded step and sat down, sending a message to the lawyer to prepare a divorce agreement while keeping an eye on the cat and dog. With the temperament of Shanglu, who has been away from home for 10.5 days, after divorce, cheese sauce is definitely not allowed to be with him. But she herself is indeed a bit afraid of cats. Sha sha sha. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps in her ear. Jiang Li followed the sound and saw a young man in his 20s standing in front of her. Feng's eyes were thin and her lips were gentle and graceful. She wore a pair of round-framed golden-rimmed glasses and a simple white shirt. She was tall and had fair skin, but her forearm, which had been exposed to sunlight, had well-proportioned and distinct muscles. It is a popular little milk dog among girls nowadays, with a small wolf dog body shape. I just don't know why, but Jiang Li always feels a bit familiar. Sister, can I borrow some sunscreen and aloe vera gel from you? Seeing Jiang Li looking up, Qiyu blushed instantly and scratched the back of his head with embarrassment, his voice becoming somewhat unnatural. Jiang Li then followed his gaze and noticed a noticeable red patch on the skin beneath his short sleeves. She lowered her head and searched in her bag, only to find one sunscreen, but there was not much left. Thank you, sister. Qiyu smiled with curved eyebrows and eyes, squeezing a little in his palm to wipe it away, but accidentally squeezed too much, leaving the tube empty. The smile on Qiyu's face instantly drooped, and he apologized to Jiang Li with a guilty expression on his face. I'm sorry sister, I didn't mean to. It's okay. Jiang Li smiled disapprovingly and looked up to see Mao Dou splashing mud in the sea, swinging his tail and rushing towards her in a frenzy. Be careful. Jiang Li quickly reached out to pull Qiyu, but couldn't hold back the strength of Mao Dou. He threw Qiyu to the ground with just one jump, and the mud and water all over his body rubbed against his white shirt, making it unsightly. Mao Dou, come down. Jiang Li felt his eyebrows and feet jumping wildly, and raised his hand to pull the traction rope of Mao Dou. Unfortunately, Mao Dou didn't know how to look at people's faces. He usually grinned at her and his thick tail twitched on Qiyu's legs. Jiang Li, She took a long breath and reached out to pull the edamame away from Qiyu's body. Suddenly, the cheese sauce joined in the fun, tilted her head for a while, and scratched Qiyu's forearm with a paw. The bloody paw prints on fair skin are very eye-catching. Wave after wave, Jiang Li felt that one head was too big, so he quickly picked up the back of the cheese sauce and pressed it back into the cat bag. Qiyu's lips turned a bit pale, and he stumbled up, but almost stumbled. It was still Jiang Li who was quick-eyed and quickly helped him. Sorry, I'll take you to the hospital first. Your clothes, I'll compensate you later. Qiyu's eyes drooped slightly and he tugged at the corner of his lips, looking obedient. Then I'll trouble you, sister, he said. If Jiang Li looked up at him at this moment, perhaps he could still see a smile flickering through his eyes. It's not troublesome. Jiang Li's face didn't look good all the way, and the cat and dog that caused the accident seemed to notice the low pressure on Jiang Li's body, and they all stayed quietly behind. There are many people in the hospital, and a group of journalists can be seen from afar, surrounding the main entrance tightly. Jiang Li hung up and helped Qiyu in. The examination result shows a left leg fracture, which requires hospitalization for observation and further vaccination. Jiang Li felt guilty in his heart, so he had someone open a VIP ward and then called to bring some fruit supplements and clothes. He was busy and didn't notice the young man behind him staring at her back for a moment. The emotions in Feng's eyes were complex, and the corners of her lips were pressed low. Qiyu watched as Jiang Li left, thinking over and over again about what the system had just said to him. Congratulations, host. The current strategy has a favorable rating of 0.01%. 0.01%, is she so difficult to conquer? This task doesn't seem as simple as imagined. When Jiang Li returned home from the law firm with a divorce agreement, it was already half dark and the house was pitch black. Shanglu has not returned yet. A cat, a dog, and Jiang Li are all starving. She filled some food with edamame and cheese sauce respectively, but she squatted on the sofa with a sandwich in her mouth, watching the divorce agreement. There's no problem with the terms. She went out of the house without any house or car. As long as she had one cat and one dog, it must be something that Shanglu was willing to see. The only trouble is, after divorce, without the support of the business, how can she avoid being counterattacked by those old foxes from the Jiang family? Since she took over the Huaxin group from her father who had betrayed her but finally suffered retribution, the old foxes of the Jiang family looked at her like hungry wild dogs looking at a little dog holding a freshly baked bone, ready to snatch the Huaxin group from her hands at any time. In the past 3 years, if it weren't for the support of merchants, she might have collapsed long ago. But she cannot collapse. She has finally come to where she is today, and she wants to tightly hold Huaxin group in her own hands. Bang bang bang. She was mesmerized by the sight, but suddenly heard a fierce knocking on the door. Hurriedly and quickly, accompanied by a burst of shouting and cursing, Jiang Li, get out of here. It's Lu Shu, the second aunt of Jiang Li. It's really a leak in the house. It's like continuous rain at night, saying that Chow Chow has arrived. Jiang Li stuffed the divorce agreement into a drawer and walked to the door in her slippers. Pop. The pungent and strong smell of perfume hit my face, followed by a slap. Jiang Li's face was filled with a burning pain, and he was momentarily stunned before being replaced by calmness. On her fair cheeks, there was a high swelling, and suddenly Mao Dou rushed over from behind, grinning and barking at the newcomer. Jiang Li was afraid that the tragedy during the day would reappear, so he quickly bent down and pressed its head to push it home, then locked the door with a click on his back. "Oh, you really care about this beast." Lu Shuxuang placed a bracelet on her chest, her face full of anger, and her mouth full of strange energy. "Your husband had a car accident and is still lying in the hospital. Do you still have the heart to manage a dog?" End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Divorce Disputes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Divorce Disputes. Jiang Li was dragged to the hospital by Lu Shu. Coincidentally, she had just seen Qiyu over during the day. Through the transparent glass on the ward, Jiang Li glanced coldly inside. Shanglu is lying on the hospital bed. Her facial features were still exquisite and beautiful beyond words, but Li's face had become a bit pale due to her illness. She used to look at her eyes with arrogance, but now she was tightly closed, and her curly and perky eyelashes trembled with his breath. It seems like a bright and flamboyant youth, shattered into glass shards. Although it's close in front of me, it seems to dissipate with the wind at any time. Fortunately, it was delivered in a timely manner, with only a slight concussion. After the patient wakes up, they will be hospitalized for observation for a period of time before being discharged. Now, please ask the family to go. The doctor's words suddenly paused, looking at the words, husband and wife, in the family column of the list with a hint of surprise. He also looked up at Jiang Li, with a hint of disbelief flashing on his face. Nowadays, the bustling commercial land is actually married. That hot search, doctor. Cough. The doctor let out a dry cough, trying to conceal the unnatural expression on his face, and continued, my family and I will go to the front desk to handle the hospitalization procedures. Thank you, doctor. Jiang Li and Lu Shu had just left and a man in a light gray suit suddenly appeared in the hospital with his hind legs. He gently pushed open the door and met the gaze of the leisurely awakened Shanglu. The latter looked impatient and said, why are you here? Who let you in? Don't be so impulsive, theoretically you should also call me uncle. The merchant was not at all annoyed by his impoliteness. He leisurely tidied up the invisible dust on his cuffs, walked to his bedside, and placed the fruit basket in his hand by the bedside. I just came back today and heard that you had a car accident. Your grandfather is not in good health, so I came to see you for him, he said, after reading it. Hurry up and get out of here. Shanglu held his face in disgust, afraid that taking another look would dirty his eyes. He impatiently poked his phone and sent a message to Jiang Li. What's wrong with Jiang Li? If you dare to hang up his phone and blackmail him, it's okay. Even now, if you don't come to see him, you can still let such a person in and get in the way. Xingyan is not someone who likes to make things worse for himself. After being polite, he turned around and left. As he walked to the door, he seemed to remember something. The pretty Danfeng narrowed his eyes slightly and said calmly, by the way, although it's a bit late, I still wish you a happy wedding. I'm looking forward to meeting you and your wife. Get lost. Shanglu angrily cursed, but Xingyan had already left first. The hallway at night was empty, and the nurses occasionally cast stunning gazes as they hurried away. The merchant stopped in the hallway for a moment, and finally heard the mechanical sound in his mind. Host, the target strategy object is about to arrive. The target strategy object is about to arrive. He lifted his foot and walked towards the elevator entrance. After paying the medical expenses, Jiang Li was scolded by Lu Shu again, and then he saw off Uncle Qi, who had only suffered skin injuries, before carrying the receipt and the newly purchased dinner into the elevator. The dark and enclosed space had always made her feel secure, but today, Jiang Li leaned against the cold armrest, and the tension brought by the mixture of anticipation and fear swept over her heart. Ding dong. The elevator door opened, and Jiang Li's heart finally fell. However, when she saw the person coming in, it soared heavily into the air, as if it was about to get stuck in her throat. The man has deep facial features, thin lips lightly pursed, and a tall and slender figure. He changed from his usual khaki trench coat to a light gray suit, and his whole body was cold and distant. His slightly narrow Danfang eyes faintly revealed a sense of authority from a superior. Pei Xingyan, she didn't read it wrong. It's really him. You. Ali. Shang Xingyan seemed to have noticed her just now, his face flashing with surprise, and then he smiled gently at her. It's been a long time since we last met, are you here too? In her usually calm eyes, for the first time, she caught a hint of panic and stared straight at the person who had occupied all her gaze during her youth before suddenly leaving. Long time no see. Jiang Li suppressed his restless and intense heartbeat, lowered his gaze no longer to look at him, and walked out of the elevator with a faint expression. I came to see a friend. It's a coincidence that I came to see a friend too. Shang Xingyan didn't doubt that he was there, and his lips curved slightly. He took out a business card from his pocket and handed it to Jiang Li. It's getting late, so if we have time next time, we can have a cup of coffee together. After a pause, he added with a smile, although we broke up, we are still friends, aren't we? Okay, Jiang Li politely smiled. The elevator door closed, and the bright down arrow seemed to have taken shape, piercing the balloon filled with sulfuric acid that was rolling on her heart with a bang. Sulfuric acid splashed everywhere, making it difficult for her to catch her breath. The light in his eyes instantly extinguished when the red arrow turned one, and Jiang Li seemed to have been drained of all his strength. He tightly pursed his lips and leaned against the horizontal bar in an instant. She propped up her strength, glanced at the crumpled business card in her hand, and casually stuffed it into the trash can before walking inside. Shanglu is staying in a VIP ward, 0801, which happens to be diagonally opposite to Qiyu. While walking, Jiang Li glanced at 0803 and found that Qiyu had already fallen asleep. She didn't want to disturb her, so she gently closed the door and returned to 0801 with her food box. Shanglu has already woken up and is now sitting by the bedside, bored and poking at his phone, looking very energetic. Seeing her come in, her hand movements only paused. The anger between her eyebrows that had just been stirred up by the business's words quietly faded away, but her tone still carried arrogance and dissatisfaction. How did you come? I just went to handle the hospitalization procedures. Jiang Li's tone was light, with a consistent sense of alienation. She placed the dinner in her hand on the table by the bedside, and because she didn't expect Shanglu to wake up, she only bought her own portion. Currently, it's not delicious to eat alone. Considering the condition and preferences of Shanglu, he reluctantly picked out his favorite pork, corn, and water dumplings and pushed them in front of him, monopolizing cola and durian. Shanglu tasted it with a disdainful expression on his face and slowly relaxed his brow. He was pulled to drink a pile of alcohol after the game ended today, and now his stomach is still burning with pain. It's rare to have a hot meal, and his heart is much calmer now. The resentment against Jiang Li that accumulated during the day has also disappeared in an instant, even looking at her feels a lot more pleasing. My gaze is gentle, with a hint of weariness. When I smile, my eyes end up and I can't hide my vitality. Jiang Li shivered for a while, but seeing that he was rarely in a good mood, he thought about another purpose of coming and dragged a chair to his side. He pondered his words and said, "How are you feeling? When should we discuss divorce?" "It's already okay." Shanglu realized the latter half of Jiang Li's sentence halfway through, looking up at her incredulously and sneering, "Divorce? No, it's me who got into the car accident, not you. It's unreasonable for you to lose your mind and talk nonsense." Perhaps due to a lack of water, the clear voice was a bit hoarse, but at this moment it exuded a hint of inexplicable tenderness. "It's not a lie," Jiang Li's expression was indifferent to Shanglu's ridicule. "I'm serious. After my divorce, I went out of the house with nothing but edamame and cheese sauce, and I didn't take a penny from the merchant's belongings. Tisk. Shanglu snorted coldly, as if watching a joke. He slowly bit down a dumpling and then looked straight at Jiang Li, his eyes burning. It was you who didn't agree to divorce back then, and now it's you who wants to divorce. Jiang Li, what are you up to? Shanglu lazily leaned back, without waiting for Jiang Li's answer, and guessed on his own. Let me guess, is it because your iron tree has blossomed and you want to have a lover and eventually get married, or is it because your ex turned around and wanted to continue the old relationship? Jiang Li choked and was surprised that Shanglu's mind was wide open, leaving him speechless for a moment. Shanglu, however, keenly caught the change in expression on her face. He immediately sat up straight, fixed his gaze on her, and even involuntarily raised his voice. Is there really Jiang Li? When did it happen? The former or the latter? Who is it? Do I recognize it? It shouldn't be. Jiang Li, you don't even have friends. Where did the peach blossoms bloom? His series of questions carried an imperceptible sourness, and Jiang Li felt a headache when he asked her. With the idea of making quick decisions or getting together easily, she answered one by one, really. Not long ago, the latter. Even if you don't know me and I don't have friends, could you talk about divorce? She spoke quickly, taking a breath without panting. Shanglu furrowed his eyebrows and stared at her, his face turning increasingly black, his gaze like a knife, as if he wanted to see a hole in her. Former. Do you still have an ex? How come I don't know? I can't tell, you're still quite infatuated. Once the ex comes back, he will sever ties with the current one. More importantly, since she still has an ex, why did she agree to this engagement in the first place? What about him? What is he? A double or a spare tire? No wonder he has always been responsive to his every request over the past 3 years. Emotions have fallen from his predecessor's side, so he came to him. Fortunately, he naively thought that this person had no temper. Shanglu was extremely restless in his heart, staring at Jiang Li, eager to see a hint of suspicion in her face. However, Jiang Li was still the one in his impression. Although she was incredibly beautiful, she was also cold and distant, making him feel unfriendly and unable to see any flaws. No, I refuse. Shanglu refused, sitting back at the bedside with a calm face, restless and not even wanting to move the remaining dumplings. It's best for you to die of this heart. Divorce is impossible. Regardless of whether what Jiang Li said is true or false, he will not agree to divorce. If what she said is true, this person used him as a stunt double for 3 years, and now when his ex comes back, he's going to kick him away and fly with someone else, but she has a beautiful idea. Although he didn't think that with Jiang Li's inexperienced personality, there would be any ex. But if what she said is false, then he is even less likely to agree, just like Jiang Li refused his divorce request 3 years ago. Yes, for any reason, Jiang Li won't let him feel better, and he won't let her feel better either. The more she wanted to let go of him, the more he insisted on dragging her to sink with him. They were already tied together, and if he couldn't escape successfully, then she couldn't. Unless he lets go himself. The two of them had a dispute, and Jiang Li didn't have the mood to eat durian layers anymore. He got up and walked away in high heels. The empty hospital room fell silent again, and Shanglu sat alone by the bedside, looking out the window at the bustling traffic. Buzzing. The vibration of his phone interrupted his trance. Shanglu took a sip of water from a cup in one hand and answered the phone with his phone in the other. Brother Lu, are you awake? Look at the hot search. Look at the hot search. You're actually going to become an emotional mentor in Love Zone. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Do you still have a younger brother? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Do you still have a younger brother? Jiang was not far away from the ward when he met Song Shu, who had arrived in the darkness. Song Shu was tightly surrounded from top to bottom, wearing a mask and hat, appearing out of place in the crowd of short-sleeved shorts around her. Mr. Jiang. Song Shu's eyes flashed with surprise when she saw Jiang Li. Why are you also in the hospital? Is there anything uncomfortable in your body? I'm fine, come and see a friend, Jiang Li politely nodded and greeted. Jiang Li's cold and aloof nature is well known in the company, and Song Shu doesn't want to embarrass herself. Thinking back to the official Weibo account that I posted in anger during the day due to being rejected by Shanglu, I almost ruined my career. I just woke up after being scolded by my agent, and now seeing Jiang Li again, I can't help but feel a little guilty. She forced a smile and was about to walk inside. Jiang Li suddenly spoke up, Song Shu, please wait a moment. I have something to say to you. Song Shu's heart instantly lifted, and her gaze hidden behind her sunglasses was erratic. She whispered, Mr. Jiang, what happened during the day was that I was too impulsive and didn't consider the impact it would have on the company. My agent has already contacted the producer of a romance show and clarified that it was me and brother Lu who attended as emotional mentors to promote the show. If it causes any losses to the company in the future, I will bear the consequences. Jiang Li had some thoughts, and Xingyan's efficiency was indeed very fast. However, what surprised her even more was that it seemed that Song Shu's private relationship with Shanglu was indeed very good, so good that Shanglu, who had no interest in variety shows, could participate in the romantic variety show. Just thinking about it, with a personality like Shanglu, who can play anywhere, the social circle naturally won't be too small. But she felt a little restless when she thought about the cold rejection of her divorce request in the ward just now. She couldn't figure out what Shanglu was up to, or what bad ideas he wanted to use to trick her. From this perspective, divorce is clearly a good choice for both parties. Well, as long as you understand. As a public figure, you still need to pay more attention to influence in the future. Jiang Li pondered slightly and said politely, you are currently in a period of career advancement, so there is no need to delay your career due to emotions. Song Shu breathed a sigh of relief and said, thank you, Mr. Jiang. I understand. Jiang Li finished speaking and left the hospital. The sky had already brightened slightly, and although there was still some drowsiness, I couldn't sleep anymore. Lying on the soft double bed, Jiang Li stared at the ceiling in a daze. Shanglu is like an untimely bomb hanging above her head, unsure when it will give her a critical blow, completely crushing her. She could even imagine what kind of arrogance and ridicule Shanglu should be in front of her in a disheveled state. Just like when the two first met and got engaged, he raised his chin slightly and looked at her with a pair of peach blossom eyes full of mockery. Jiang Li still remembers very clearly to this day. When the two passed by, he whispered in her ear, is there no one left in the Jiang family? Send this beggar here. For a moment, her head was swollen and painful. Coincidentally, her phone lit up and she glanced casually. She immediately sat up, and her drowsiness dissipated completely in an instant. It is a hot search push. Shanglu married. Jiang Li's heart tightened, not knowing what this young master was up to. She clicked in and took a look, which originated from two Weibo posts posted by Shanglu. One is a promotional poster from the Falling in Love with You program group that was forwarded, and the other is accompanied by a photo of a marriage certificate with the text, My wife. AIT's is Jiang Li. The comments section was filled with, where did the wild woman come from? How could she match our brother Shanglu? And, after finishing, the CP I hit was actually B. It is completely opposite to the previously identical blessing lock 999 under Song Shu's Weibo post. Jiang Li. In an instant, a person's heart felt like a knife. She doesn't know how Shanglu found her private social media account. Fortunately, she is not very active on social media platforms. Since registering in high school, this account has been like a decoration, except for browsing news and not posting any updates. The personal signature and follow bar are both blank and cannot be left blank. Nicknames are a series of original numbers used during registration, and even the private messaging function is disabled on the day of registration. The netizen watched her Weibo for a long time, but couldn't find any information she wanted, and even couldn't send insulting private messages. She was so angry that she even posted on Weibo. Jiang Li picked up too and took a look. Fortunately, compared to the insults and oppression of those people back then, it was too childish. After checking the number of reposts and reads again, she pondered for a moment before packaging and forwarding the screenshot and original Weibo to the lawyer for resolution. Shanglu had already responded to her alone enough, and this time and twice, it naturally did not affect her mood, but only made her more determined to divorce. The temperature today is much lower than the previous 2 days, and the sunlight is not as direct. Therefore, Jiang Li chose to wear a simple white shirt and a hip-wrapped skirt. I put on light makeup in front of the mirror to cover my dark circles under my eyes, fed a cat and a dog, and drove to the hospital. I also bought 2 breakfasts before going to the hospital. Shanglu stayed up all night and has been sitting alone by the window, daydreaming since last night when he suppressed his anger and drove Song Shu away. He couldn't understand why Jiang Li proposed divorce at this time, and couldn't figure out if there was really the person she was talking about. However, no matter which question it was, it made him very irritable. Shanglu tilted his head against the glass, and his peach blossom eyes, which used to sparkle and smile, stared down at the downstairs for a moment, silent like a stagnant pool of water. Until a slender yet tall figure appeared in his field of vision, his eyes lit up instantly. He quickly got up, got into the bathroom, and looked at the mirror to confirm his condition. He then turned around and got into bed, looking sickly and waiting for her to come in. Jiang Li ran into a group of friends in the commercial land convoy as soon as he left the elevator. "Sister-in-law, are you also coming to see Brother Lu?" Song Dynasty smiled and placed his hand on the fat man's shoulder, glancing at her breakfast and jokingly said, "Sister-in-law bought so much. Let me help you carry it. Could you please leave it to him?" Jiang Li didn't originally plan to see Shanglu, but it would be great if someone could help at the moment. She handed one of the breakfasts to the Song Dynasty and politely nodded goodbye. "I still have to go see a friend, so I'll leave first." After finishing speaking, he walked deep into the hallway carrying another breakfast and entered 0803. The Song Dynasty and the others looked at each other and entered 0801 with a smile on their faces. "Jiang Li, come here." Upon hearing the sound of the door opening, Shanglu tugged at the blanket on his body, rolled over and opened his eyes to look. However, when he saw the person entering, he suddenly stopped and his voice rose 2 degrees from the deliberately lowered hoarse moment. "How could it be you?" His narrow peach blossom eyes widened slightly, and he half sat up to look behind them without giving up, but he didn't see half of the figure he had just seen. He has good eyesight and won't make mistakes. The one downstairs is Jiang Li. The chubby man looked clear on his chest and frowned at the Song Dynasty. "Brother Lu actually doesn't want to see us. It's fortunate that we even got up early this weekend to see Brother Lu. TSK, it's really sad. Be humble." Shanglu raised his eyebrows slightly and casually threw a pillow, which was caught by one hand of the Song Dynasty. "Brother Lu, where do you want to see us? You clearly want to see your sister-in-law. Song Dynasty placed the breakfast in his hand by the bedside. Brother Lu, your sister-in-law brought it for you. Eat it while it's hot." Shanglu frowned and said, "Where is she?" "My sister-in-law said to go see a friend, right next door." "Friend?" Shanglu's voice became somewhat muffled. As they said yesterday, Jiang Li is a person who doesn't even have friends. Jiang Li in his memory has always been solitary. Although she is incredibly beautiful, she always has a cold face and a detached and indifferent demeanor throughout her body, rejecting people from thousands of miles away. "On weekdays, except for business trips and going to work, I play with cats and walk dogs at home." Shanglu remembered what Jiang Li had said yesterday, and the suppressed restlessness surged back in his heart. He casually glanced at the breakfast opened by the Song dynasty, frowned even tighter, and stood up to walk out. He wanted to see what kind of person Jiang Li wanted to divorce him for. "Hey brother Lu, are you okay with your injury and just get out of bed?" At the same time, when Jiang Li pushed open the door of room 0803, Qi Yu was on the phone. When he saw her coming in, he was just stunned. He immediately hung up the phone and smiled, pouring her a glass of water. "Good morning, sister." Jiang Li set aside the breakfast he brought and said, "I don't know your taste, so I bought some casually. You can try it first." "Thank you, sister." Qi Yu smiled and took it, pushing the poured water over to Jiang Li. Seeing her looking at her leg that had been cast, he explained, "Nurse sister just came in to change the medicine, sister, don't worry." Jiang Li lowered his head to look at his phone and prepared to get up and walk outside. "Then you rest well. The caregiver will come to take care of you in an hour. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first." After a pause, she took out a business card from her bag and handed it to him. "This is my business card. You can contact me anytime if you have anything in the future, and my phone number is also a WeChat account." "Okay, goodbye sister, be careful on the way." Jiang Li let out a but as soon as she arrived at the door, she had a face-to-face meeting with Shanglu. In order to avoid suspicion, she did not close the door when she entered, so as soon as Shanglu arrived at the door, he heard a very clear, "Goodbye sister," and instinctively wanted to look inside. However, Jiang Li took him one step closer to the door, cutting off his sight. He could not see the man's face clearly, only vaguely could see that there was a breakfast at the head of the bed exactly like that brought by the Song dynasty. "Jiang Li, do you still have a younger brother?" Shanglu put his hands in his pockets and raised his eyebrows with a smile, his tone a bit gloomy. "My heart was filled with sourness, anger, and hatred, but my face still smiled brightly, and my peach blossom eyes narrowed slightly." He reached out a hand to push the door and smiled, "Can you show me? We've been married for so long, how come I didn't know you still have a younger brother?" Pop. Jiang Li slapped his hand and frowned at him, saying, "Shanglu, you can stop at the appropriate time." The tone was as cold as ever, but Shanglu couldn't help but sense a hint of threatening warning from it. In the past, no matter how much he mocked, Jiang Li would disguise his emotions very well, but today there is a faint intention of tearing apart the disguise. She is clearly disgusted with him. This kind of cognition displeased Shanglu, and if he had to find a reason, he felt that it should be unwillingness. Jiang Lihui, who was unwilling to accept his always accommodating requests, disliked him for the sake of others. Not content with being a substitute for others for Jiang Li. The young master has lived for 25 years, where has he suffered such injustice? For a moment, the atmosphere between the two became somewhat stiff. Jiang Li realized that he needed the cooperation of Shanglu to successfully sign the divorce agreement, so he softened his tone and said, "I asked Song dynasty to bring you breakfast. You can eat it while it's hot. Your injury is not fully healed yet, so go back and rest first." Shanglu's eyes trembled, and he knew it was intentional to distract him. He withdrew his hand, the back of which had turned red and tingled. After biting his back teeth for a long time, he smiled brightly and said, "All right, then go ahead and get busy first." Jiang Li was surprised by Shanglu's sudden ease of speaking, and a faint sense of unease arose in his heart. But the two of them are also getting divorced, and I just hope this young master wants to have a good time together and break up, and less trouble for her. She let out a and turned away, but before she even stepped into the elevator, she heard a noisy sound behind her. "Brother Lu! Wake up! Doctor, call a doctor quickly." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Pei Xingyan returns to China. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Pei Xingyan returns to China. Jiang Li withdrew 1 foot from the elevator and turned back. Many times she had to admit that the young master of this merchant had always been very talented in causing trouble. Knowing that she was allergic to bean products, she traitorously drank all the soybean milk she bought. As a result, she was sent to the emergency room for emergency treatment without saying anything, and she asked for leave to wait in the hospital. Signing and registering to pay for medical expenses, Jiang Li waited in a state of boredom, all focused on whether the cat and dog at home were eating and drinking well, and her fingers kept poking at her phone screen. The hot search for Shanglu married is still hanging high. Under the Weibo post that Shanglu posted last night, it was okay. Although fans were angry, they were not just dancing on top of their head, but under a newly built super talk called, "Where Did Mrs. Xiaolu Go?" Fans from various families and Shanglu groups gathered together and directly engaged in battles. Where did the wild chicken come from and deserve to be called Mrs. Xiaolu? Anyone who breaks my CP's SB will give me a refund. 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 Is his brain sick? Is it sick? Is it sick? Is it sick? It's not good to be with any small flower in the entertainment industry who has worked together before. He must be tied up with an unknown wild chicken. The wild rooster must have taken a liking to our little brother Lu's appearance and fame. She definitely doesn't really love him. Truffles are the only CP in my heart. Xiaolu Xiaolu. Don't have a love brain, Stay away from that wild chicken. Love brain is so big. The words were full of anger, and a dog passing by might get kicked twice. In the midst of a series of curses, Jiang Li's unknown Mrs. Lu was scolded as a wild chicken, and some even used this as a meme to create many ghostly videos and emojis, which were widely spread on various social media platforms. She watched expressionlessly for a few minutes, and suddenly a message popped up in the WeChat group of her high school class, which had been silent for several years, attracting her attention. Family members, do you know that Pei Xingyan has returned to China? Jiang Li's heart skipped a beat, and the inexplicable swelling and pain from yesterday surged back into her mind. The situation of encountering Pei Xingyan last night also jumped back into her mind, causing her brain to ache faintly. It turned out that he lost contact after only saying, "break up," because he wanted to go abroad. Why didn't you tell her? Are you afraid that she will continue to entangle? Also, in the eyes of others, between her and Pei Xingyan, from beginning to end, it was her one-sided persistent entanglement and unwillingness to let go. For a moment, the chatter in the class group became lively, and everyone was discussing Pei Xingyan's style and achievements in the past. Jiang Li's thoughts were also a bit chaotic. Pei Xingyan is a well-known student god in A, with a good temper, good appearance, good grades, and good playing skills. It is said that his family background is also very good, and he is given the nickname Pei Shen. His name is always linked to honor on the bulletin board, and most girls who are just starting to fall in love crush him with a single arrow. In contrast, the only two things she can connect with him are her grades that are not on par with him, as well as the 4 years of pleasing her desk mate behind him. And then there was the inexplicable love that started, but only lasted for 3 years before ending without any success. Although these past memories have been deliberately forgotten by her in the depths of her memory, Pei Xingyan, as a person, always easily causes her mood to become chaotic. I don't know who mentioned it, do you still remember the little tale that always followed Pei Shen back then? After a moment of silence in the class group, someone stood up to Jiang Li and said, "Are you talking about this illegitimate daughter?" Right, it's her. I remember she used to wander around in front of Pei Shen. I heard that she was also admitted to the same university as Pei Shen in the college entrance examination, but I don't know how things are now. She's the only one. I can't do it, someone retorted. How did I hear that her mother died during the college entrance examination? She didn't do well and went to a second-tier university in another city. But how do I remember that year after graduation, she posted an official announcement on her social media, which was about her relationship with Pei Shen. This statement is like throwing a huge stone on a calm water surface, causing a huge uproar. "I'll go, I remember too. Pei Shen was really chased by her, but I heard she didn't talk long before Pei Shen left her and went abroad. I'll tell you, how could Pei Shen be blind enough to take a liking to her? It must be because he saw her persistently fighting and couldn't bear to refuse, so he kindly offered to socialize with her. Now that Pei Shen has returned, she can't figure out how to continue her entanglement." Other people said something else, but Jiang Li didn't have time to look. A message popped up from a private conversation about a gray silhouette avatar that had been quiet for a long time. "Don't take it to heart. The note is, Pei Xingyan." Jiang Li finally realized that she had not deleted his contact information since the breakup. At first it was hard to let go, but later it became unnecessary. Jiang Li replied with a good tone, polite and indifferent. There was a message saying, "The other party is typing," for a while, but there was no message sent. Jiang Li looked up and saw that it was already 12 o'clock. The green beans and cheese sauce had not been fed yet, but there was still no movement in the emergency room. She is a bit impatient now. Song Chao, who was standing beside her, secretly glanced over and thought she was worried about Shanglu. She quietly leaned over and comforted, "Sister-in-law, don't worry. Brother Lu has experienced this kind of thing many times. When he first arrived at the convoy, we didn't know he had a lot of dietary restrictions. He ate and drank recklessly every day. Brother Lu would take him to the hospital every day, and later decided to apply for a membership card." Jiang Li nodded and whispered back, I know. There are many picky eaters in Shanglu, peanut allergies, lactose intolerance, and even tomatoes can only be stir-fried with eggs. Other methods are not enough. Jiang Li used to be troubled by him a lot before, and gradually became accustomed to it. He often ordered takeout directly and sent it over, regardless of whether he liked it or not. Just as I was thinking, Shanglu had already been pushed out. His face was pale and his complexion was not good. His peach blossom eyes were half closed, and his long and curly eyelashes trembled lightly. When he saw Jiang Li, he closed his eyes again, as if he had never opened them before. The doctor handed a list to Jiang Li and earnestly advised, "The patient has a lot of allergens, and family members should pay more attention to his diet on a daily basis." "Okay, thank you, doctor." With the help of the nurse, Shanglu was sent back to the ward. During this time, Lu Shu and Uncle Chi both visited and brought fish soup and pork bone rice. She placed the fish soup by the bedside and was about to leave. Shanglu gave her a weak glare and called out to her, "Where are you going? Are you going to see your little brother?" He deliberately bit the words, "younger brother," hard, his dark pupils fixed on Jiang Li. "He's all like this," she still thinks of her so-called white moonlight brother. Shanglu intentionally put on a fierce and evil expression, but due to a prolonged lack of water and a hoarse voice, coupled with such a half-dead and sickly appearance, it actually dissipated a lot of the evil energy on his face, adding a sense of fragmentation to him. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Young Master and Dog. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Young Master and Dog. I went home, but I haven't fed the edamame and cheese sauce yet. Jiang Li glanced at him and casually served him a bowl of fish soup. "Can you drink the fish soup?" She didn't say it was okay, but when she said it, Shanglu became even more angry. In her eyes, he was not as important as a cat and a dog. Shanglu withdrew his gaze and couldn't help but say, "You can drink it. Just put it aside." Jiang Li let out a and then turned around to leave. Shanglu was extremely depressed. The two of them had been married for 3 years, and he had long become accustomed to Jiang Li's love for dogs. Not to mention that he was still lying here today, even if one day he fell into the river with Mao Dou, Jiang Li must have saved him first. As for her so-called white moonlight, he doesn't think it's more important than edamame in her heart. Both of them couldn't compare to a dog in her heart, and upon thinking about it, Shanglu's heart became balanced again. He sent the bustling Song dynasty and the chubby guy back, and his spare time fell on the steaming fish soup by the bedside. After thinking for a moment, he picked up his phone and took a photo. The fish soup served by Mrs. Xiaolu. Send. He wants to see how she can get rid of him and reunite with her so-called white moonlight brother. From this, he realized that Jiang Li used to like things under the new year. No wonder we agreed so happily when we got engaged and married. Shanglu threw his phone aside, as if he had won a battle, calmly drinking fish soup, completely unaware that the hot search in Super Talk had already exploded due to his previous Weibo post. Hot search has become popular, and in the Super Talk, there is even more resentment. Whether it's greeting Jiang Li's ancestors for 18 generations or cursing him in his posthumous photo. Fortunately, Jiang Li had already learned from his past experiences. When he saw it, he didn't have much excitement in his heart. He casually dealt with a bunch of unsightly little red dots, and then fed the cheese sauce cat strips while handling the news. This includes an unread message from Xingyan. Do you want to come with tonight's team building? She didn't reply, just opened the class group that was set to be undisturbed, and only then did she know that everyone was preparing to hold a team building tonight to help Xingyan clean up the dust. Since graduating from high school, she has cut off contact with her high school classmates. To be precise, it was she who unilaterally wanted to draw a line between herself and the past, deleting all the people and groups that needed to be deleted, leaving only one class group to remind her that her past experiences of being excluded and isolated were not a dream. But it's only limited to this. Xingyan sent another message. If it's not convenient, it's okay, don't force it. He remained as understanding as ever, reminding her of when he was ostracized and isolated by his classmates. Instead of cutting off contact with her under the advice of his classmates, he volunteered to be her desk mate and suggested to the teacher. Jiang Li's hands trembled slightly. She replied, okay. A heart finally sank, and she placed her hands on the steering wheel, staring absent-mindedly at the dense and straight two-ball suspension trees on both sides of the road. Xingyan immediately sent the address of the team building, which was a high-end Western restaurant called Di Xingtai located opposite the Drum Tower not far from a middle school. Jiang Li used to walk with Xingyan for a while and then wave goodbye under the Drum Tower every month when he returned home from vacation. At that time, the Western restaurant had not yet been built, and only an old bookstore stood under dense camphor leaves. Many familiar faces came and went inside, including a cow cat with a broken tail by a mischievous child, as well as her and Xingyan. Speaking of which, the place they used to date the most was that bookstore. Xingyan likes Schopenhauer, while she likes Dickens. The two of them often exchange book lists, and this habit lasted from the second year of high school to the third year. He broke up with him as a result of suddenly losing contact. Shanglu discovered that when Jiang Li returned to the hospital, the morning skirt had been replaced with a well-designed black suit pants, and the upper body was a short and loose white T-shirt, revealing a beautiful and smooth waistline when raised. The makeup on his face was very light, and his red hair had also changed to a light color scheme. He had thick, black, seaweed-like long hair that was loose and tied behind him with a ponytail. At this moment, he was sitting on the sofa across from the hospital bed, with his legs crossed, facing the computer while working. His eyes occasionally lowered to look at the time on his phone. He rarely sees her distracted from work. Are you going on a business trip? Shanglu put down his magazine and poured himself a glass of warm water, intending to ease the delicate atmosphere between the two, pretending to be casual. I'm going to participate in a team building tonight, so I should be a bit late. Jiang Li didn't even look up, his slender fingers jumping rapidly on the keyboard, making a clear sound. By the way, I've already sent the electronic version of the divorce agreement to your email. You can take some time to check the terms and contact me by email if you have any questions. It's a completely business-oriented tone. Shanglu was so angry that he couldn't even drink water. It was then that he remembered that all his contact information, except for his email, had been blocked by her. Jiang Li paused for a moment and then looked up to add, "Of course, if you continue to call in a series of deadly calls, I don't mind if we fly pigeons to deliver messages in the future." She had a rare chance of being humorous, but Shanglu choked and decided to throw away her magazine and take her phone to check her email. As expected, an email with the theme of divorce agreement was lying peacefully in his empty mailbox. The terms inside are almost the same as what Jiang Li said last night, except for edamame and cheese sauce. She takes no money and leaves the house clean. It seems that she is determined to get a divorce. Just to reunite with that former white moonlight. I still said the same thing last night, I refuse. Shanglu deleted the email with a black face and leaned back casually. Divorce is impossible. If you don't mind letting the white moonlight on your heart shine as a third party, I don't mind having a green hat. In short, it is impossible for him to make room for them to fly together. It's impossible in this lifetime. He wants both legitimacy and a win-win situation. TSK, why didn't he see it before? She's not only bold, but also ambitious. Jiang Li glared at him and knew that the divorce had not been resolved. In order to avoid further arguments, she slammed her computer and walked out. Shanglu raised his eyebrows disapprovingly and continued behind her, adding, "Of course, if you are really determined to hide your beauty in a golden house, it's better to hide it well, otherwise it's you, not me, who will be ruined. I believe paparazzi would be happy to see explosive news like Mrs. Xiaolu's infidelity. Yes, he doesn't care at all. Anyway, it's not him who has fallen into disrespect." As he spoke, he shook his phone again and laughed arrogantly. "Speaking of which, isn't Mrs. Xiaolu planning to turn me back on?" Jiang Li walked away without looking back, stepping on his high heels. The smile on Shanglu's face dissipated as he raised his hand and dialed a phone number. "Duzhong, please check the identity of patient 0803 from the 9th hospital." Damn it, he doesn't care. He had to figure out what kind of person was worth it. She would rather leave the house clean than divorce him. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Boss's Wife. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Boss's wife. Jiang Li walked out of the ward, and the pent-up anger in his heart suddenly dissipated, and his face regained its usual coldness and self-reliance. She thought she had always been good at managing emotions, but every time she seemed to be defeated by Shanglu. This person seems to have a kind of magic that can easily stir up her emotions. Pei Xingyan sent another message. "If you have any trouble, you can tell me and I will pick you up." He didn't ask what the trouble was, and carefully avoided her embarrassment and awkwardness, just like encountering her wet and disheveled like an abandoned little wolf on the school corridor before. He didn't ask anything, just said, offended, gently, and then draped his coat with the fragrance of laundry detergent over her shoulder. Such a person is polite and distant. It is difficult not to be liked, but also to worry about gains and losses. Jiang Li replied, "Thank you, no need." Speaking of which, both he and she have the same habit of sending messages, preferring a short and complete sentence with a period at the end, but rarely sending emojis. It was still early, so she took another look at 0803. Chi Yu was on lunch break, and the caregiver he invited was a young and beautiful girl named Fang Chu. She was 23 years old and a junior intern. She was sitting quietly on the side, playing with her phone, and looking up at Chi Yu's sleeping face. The person who invited her over was obviously a very wealthy woman, and she was not very old when she heard the voice. She was puzzled and worried, speculating about the relationship between the gold owner and the young and beautiful boy in bed. But how to guess? It is also difficult to avoid associating with the dirty side, especially when the young man smiled lightly while holding a business card, his slender fingers gently caressing the name and photo on the card. At a glance, she was indeed a young girl who was incredibly beautiful. Fang Chu quickly noticed Jiang Li standing at the door. Seeing her standing outside, he quickly ran over and lowered his voice, asking her to enter. "Hello, may I ask if you're looking for Mr. Qi?" Jiang Li also followed her example and lowered his voice. "Let me take a look at him. How is his injury?" Mr. Qi said he felt much better. Fang Chu turned around and glanced at the two of them. Seeing that their relationship was not very familiar, his speculations were further confirmed, and he couldn't help feeling a bit regretful. How good would it be to have a serious and grandiose relationship between two people who are obviously talented and beautiful? However, she didn't understand the world of wealthy people. Fang Chu tugged at the corner of her lips, and her attitude towards Jiang Li was not as polite and friendly as before. Mr. Qi fell asleep after lunch. "If you have anything to do, I can convey it on your behalf." "No need," Jiang Li's expression was faint. "Could you please take care of him?" After she finished speaking, she turned around and left the hospital. Perhaps it's because on weekends, people from Xingyan shuttle back and forth with youthful faces, handsome men and beautiful women, full of vitality. Jiang Li parked the Cayenne at the old parking spot on a familiar light car. As soon as he entered the door, he saw a waiter warmly welcoming him. "Hello, welcome, may I ask if there is an appointment?" Sister.in.law, boss lady. Halfway through Du Zhong's words, he suddenly stopped when he looked up and saw Jiang Li's face. The phrase, little sister.in.law, that used to be passed down among friends was about to slip out of his mouth, but when it reached his mouth, he forcefully bit her back. He looked up behind her and didn't see the expected figure of Shanglu Zhongyang. Du Zhong's expression was full of disbelief. "Boss, he didn't come." "Well, he's still recovering," Jiang Li replied. No wonder Du Zhong was so surprised to see her. Xingyan is a small shop that merchants throw at Shanglu for fun. Only when she is in a particularly good mood, Shanglu will bring her over to gather with friends in the convoy. But she is a cold-tempered person who doesn't know how to drink, doesn't know how to drive, doesn't understand the emerging memes of the times, and can't get into the conversation. A few times she came, she was sitting alone in the corner, working on the computer, and over time, Shanglu no longer brought her over. "Look at my memory, I've forgotten all about it." Du Zhong slapped himself on the forehead in frustration and smiled awkwardly. "Boss, are you alone or waiting for a friend?" "But the VIP room is already fully booked." "It's okay, I'll wait for my friends." Jiang Li glanced at the busy group of salespeople in the store, who were standing on the ground. The English-style old clock on the wall showed that the time was still early. "You keep busy, I can sit down as I please." That's what he said, but Du Zhong still didn't dare to neglect her. He politely led her to a window seat and said, "Boss, just tell them what you want to drink." "Okay, thank you." Du Zhong gritted his head and smiled, only to breathe a sigh of relief when he reached the hollow flower wall. He casually stuffed the promotional flyer into the new waiter's hand and called Shanglu, saying, "Brother Lu, you're not loyal enough, are you? Just asking me to help you check people doesn't mean my sister.in.law will come to the store. I didn't even have any preparation, I didn't even have time to change clothes, it really affects my image in front of my sister.in.law. Don't be stingy, even if you are so proactive in finding a girlfriend, you won't be single until now," said Shanglu with a smile. He knew that his group of fox friends and dog friends were both used to it, either practicing driving or racing on weekdays, or rarely interacting with girls if it wasn't for dating or necessary reasons. "Every time I see Jiang Li, she is always in a hurry, making both sides uncomfortable. Over time, he rarely takes her to sway in front of them." She went to the store alone. Du Zhong turned around and saw that Jiang Li was focused on the computer at a loss. He lowered his voice and said, "Sister-in-law came alone, but it seems like she's waiting for someone." Shanglu was also taken aback, her peach blossom eyes sparkling as she looked out the window. The building across from him was covered in lush green ivy, swaying its leaves gently in the warm summer breeze. Unconsciously, it reminded him of the clear, sister, sound. He impatiently tugged at the top button of the collar and then suppressed the restlessness. No, it shouldn't be that white moonlight. Her white moonlight is still lying in the hospital like him. She said she wants to participate in team building, probably with colleagues in the company. Shanglu raised his hand and rubbed his brow, feeling a slight pain for some reason. Don't worry about her, you should send me the information I need as soon as possible, otherwise you won't want this month's bonus either. Don't bother, Brother Lu. Du Zhong let out a mournful cry and then thought of something else. He quickly changed the topic and said sorrowfully, but then, Brother Lu, when will you talk to your sister-in-law and ask her to introduce her best friend to us? Our brothers have begged you many times. You can't just leave us alone when you're full. Want a girlfriend? Shanglu's lips curved with a mischievous smile, hoping that Jiang Li, that ice slut, could have a best friend, rather than hoping that Mao Dou could drive. Listen to me, tonight at 9:30, close the store, have a cup of hot milk, wash and sleep, everything in your dream. Du Zhong let out another mournful cry, but Shanglu hung up the phone directly. At this moment, 3 or 5 young girls dressed in fashionable and beautiful clothes entered the door. Du Zhong immediately straightened his expression and returned to the counter without leaving a trace. The girls looked around the store, and one of the sweet-looking girls suddenly had a bright eye. She walked behind the hollow flower wall with high heels and said, Jiang Li. You're here too. Yesterday they were in the group, but you didn't even come out. I thought you wouldn't come today. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Seizing the Limelight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Seizing the limelight. Well, I came a bit early. Jiang Li finished typing the last few words in response to the planning proposal before closing the computer. The girl had already sat next to her very familiar. Jiang Li didn't like to have physical contact with people, so she instinctively moved aside. Li Wei also noticed that she was wearing a simple shirt and suit pants, which subconsciously linked her to the girl from the past who could only pay tuition fees through poverty alleviation. A hint of contempt flashed in his eyes. She looked up and gave a glance to her companion, who understood, and each pulled open their chairs to sit down. One of them squeezed to the other side of Jiang Li, who recognized her and called her Yu Hao. Yu Hao made a mysterious expression in a moderate voice and said, Jiang Li, don't you remember her? Li Wei, she's now in the entertainment industry, and she's the one who starred in the popular Tingzhou Ji these days. Jiang Li then turned his head to look at her again. Many things she deliberately forgot were actually not forgotten, just waiting for a breakthrough point, and she rushed out of it first and then. Pei Xingyan became the breakthrough point, and everything else came naturally. Li Wei, she actually hasn't forgotten either. They used to have a good relationship, so good that they agreed to be each other's bridesmaids, but I don't know why they all changed later on. Like Pei Xingyan, she shared the sunshine with her, but in a moment, she silently distanced herself from her, and her gaze towards her was always filled with disgust. I haven't forgotten. Jiang Li withdrew his gaze and politely smiled, I've heard of you. Li Wei is currently a contracted artist under Xingyue Company. She is beautiful, sings well, performs well, and has strong business skills. She is also known as a hardworking mistress, and has won many awards since her debut, making her very famous in the industry. It's rare that Jiang Damei also has the leisure to pay attention to the entertainment industry. Li Wei glanced at her sideways, dissatisfied with her indifferent and arrogant appearance, and pretended to intimately hold Jiang Li's arm, but was subconsciously pulled out by her. Jiang Li stood up and sat in the empty seat across from him, saying calmly, It's necessary for work. Li Wei's face turned pale and she felt a bit embarrassed. Yu Hao tried to make up for it in a timely manner and asked, It's been so long. Where do you work now, Jiang Li? How is your salary and benefits? Huasheng, Jiang Li replied, the treatment is decent. Yu Hao was shocked and said, Huasheng. So, you and Vivi are also considered colleagues? Yes, Jiang Li nodded without explaining much. Xingyan is a subsidiary of Huasheng, and to some extent, she and Li Wei are indeed colleagues. Have you ever seen Shu Shu? It's Song Shu. Yu Hao's eyes lit up, and when he saw Jiang Li nodding, his eyes lit up even more. If he hadn't taken into account the crowd around him, he might have already screamed with both hands gripping Jiang Li's shoulder. She's really beautiful. I really like her. I check in every day for her amazing words. I also really like to kiss her and Xiaolu's CP, they are perfect match. Yu Hao exclaimed excitedly, suddenly venting again, but why did Xiaolu get married to a wild chicken just because of his love brain? So suddenly, it's not too late or too early, but it's just when we hit the top of CP that we clarified. Yu Hao angrily took a bite of the brownie brought up by the waiter and said, it must be that wild chicken who can't see us Shu Shu and Xiaolu Hao. It's really bad to ride on Xiaolu's heat. How could Xiaolu marry that kind of person? Jiang Li's eyes trembled and he remained silent. If she remembers correctly, it is clear that she married Shanglu before. I remember Shanglu and Song Shu were going to work together as mentors for love affairs, and I happen to be the same. If you want to sign, I can help. Li Wei held her hands on her chest and sweetly interrupted Yu Hao's regretful words. Firstly, she doesn't think that as a small citizen like Jiang Li, she can climb much higher in Huasheng. At most, she is an ordinary employee, and she has no interest in the work and life of such a small citizen. Secondly, Song Shu and she are currently secretly competing for an endorsement, and in this main venue that belongs to her, she doesn't want to hear too much about Song Shu. Jiang Li and Yu Hao looked up at her together, and Li Wei smiled with her eyebrows and eyes curved, resembling a sweet and charming image of a neighbor sister, which perfectly matched her usual pure character in public. Yu Hao and the other two girls were so surprised that they were about to scream. They intimately wrapped their arms around Li Wei and said, "That's great, Wei Wei. You're absolutely amazing." Li Wei smiled slightly and said, "It's a piece of cake," because of the little sweetness she threw out with this sentence. Yu Hao and the other two girls were all distracted by her. They chattered around her, trying to please and tease her, whether intentionally or unintentionally. No one remembered Jiang Li. Jiang Li sat alone on a wooden chair, like a prisoner, wandering and exiled outside the door by the youthful laughter of this young girl. It's the same as before. Du Zhong was greeting guests at the front desk, occasionally looking over to ease the atmosphere by going up to help Jiang Li out. A group of people walked in from the door. The leader is a man with outstanding temperament that is unforgettable. His facial features are exquisite, he is wearing a dark red shirt, and his left arm is equipped with a black sleeve hoop, outlining a tight muscle contour. With one hand adjusting the cuff, he is leaning his head to listen attentively to the long speeches of people around him. The Danfeng's eyes were hidden behind the golden-rimmed eyes, and as they casually passed over a person, it seemed as if the ruler was scrutinizing his subjects. However, the thin lips lightly pursed the corners of his lips, creating a slight curve that diluted the pressure of his superior and added a lot of gentleness. Du Zhong quickly welcomed him, but Li Wei suddenly waved and took a small step towards Yu Hao, pushing him aside. "Pei Shen, long time no see. Long time no see." The merchant was stunned for a moment, and looked up to see Jiang Li following behind Li Wei with a distant expression on his face. A slight smile appeared in his eyes, whether it was to Jiang Li or to Li Wei. Du Zhong, who was pushed aside, bumped his waist onto the cabinet, causing him to grin in pain. When he looked up again, he found that the man was staring at Jiang Li just now. Along with the man who looked over, there was also a group of oily and smiling men following him, with malicious eyes recklessly falling on Jiang Li. "Is this Jiang Li?" One of the chubby men raised his hand with a smile and rubbed his red bumps on his chin, his eyes flashing with a hint of surprise. "The beautiful woman is indeed a beautiful woman. After all these years, there has been no change at all." Li Wei snorted coldly, dissatisfied that Jiang Li could just stand there quietly and steal her limelight. However, when she saw a group of disgusting and greasy men in front of her, she felt a sense of revenge and pleasure in her heart. Therefore, she had no intention of going up to help Jiang Li out, and neither Xiaohua nor a group of girls later on were willing to be this rising star. "Hello," the merchant nodded at Jiang Li with a smile and showed Du Zhong the QR code on his phone. "I made an appointment yesterday." Okay. Du Zhong looked as if he had finally regained his senses, guiding the way and carefully observing Jiang Li, who had been left alone on the last side. He is a man who understands men the most. Jiang Li, a cold and beautiful woman who can only be seen from afar and cannot be played with, can most arouse a man's desire for blasphemy. The greasy man's gaze just now can tell the truth. If Jiang Li had any mishaps with him, not to mention that Shanglu would not spare him, neither the merchants nor the Jiang family could spare him. A sense of responsibility called, "protecting my sister." In law, arose, but just now the greasy man thought he was just as lecherous as himself. The two of them greeted Du Zhong well and smiled, saying, "The last one, the beautiful woman, has as many men to play with as changing clothes. It's not something your little boy can handle. Please advise him to rest his lecherous mind." Du Zhong lit a wax in his heart and quickly ran to the end, asking in a voice that everyone could hear, "Boss, are they all your friends? Do you want me to tell the boss that you're exempt from this order?" End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Escaping the Siege. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Escaping the siege. Everyone was surprised and turned around to find that Du Zhong was calling out Jiang Li, with a more pronounced expression of surprise on his face. Although Di Xingtai has only been in operation for a few years, due to its high-end interior decoration, good service attitude, and the use of high-end ingredients, the food cooked is delicious and well-known in the upper-class circle, especially among young wealthy children. The annual turnover is nearly 10 million, and Jiang Li, who was once known as a poor professional in the class, is actually the boss's wife of Di Xingtai. The first person to exclaim in surprise was Xiaohua, "Oh my God, Jiang Li, are you married yet?" Li Wei was also surprised, but facing the camera all year round had already taught her excellent facial expression management skills. Therefore, she just raised an eyebrow and looked at Jiang Li's clothes, which were so simple that they couldn't be more simple. Apart from her transcendent and ethereal demeanor, it is really difficult to associate her with the title of Boss Di Sante. Is it really fake? Some people couldn't help but question, changing their indifference towards Jiang Li just now. They approached with a smile, "Why don't you even inform us about your marriage, beautiful woman? You're too unfriendly." Upon hearing this, Xingyan also looked towards her, with a gaze that belonged exclusively to the upper echelons through the lenses, which seemed not surprising. Jiang Li avoided his gaze and admitted calmly, "Yes, I've been married for 3 years. I don't know who whispered. What kind of proprietress, an illegitimate daughter, may be the same as his mother, she is all wrapped up and raised, or it's good to show off." It's a man's voice. Jiang Li heard the sound and looked over. It was the greasy man who had just greeted her. It seems that her name is Lu Wei. Rumors about her sleeping with a man spread throughout the school, and even maliciously spread to her mother's ears, causing her to have a sudden heart attack and finally not survive that summer. The people around also calmed down, and the girl next to Jiang Li who had just squeezed in seemed to have thought of something, moving 3 steps away without leaving a trace. A group of people muttered, occasionally casting strange glances at her, their eyes filled with contempt. Indeed, isn't it just selling her body and relying on men? She's done less about this. Biaozi means biaozi, you can choose not to have any face for the sake of money. Don't talk nonsense, Ali's marriage is a good thing, said the business firm in a timely manner to ease the situation. As he spoke, he looked up at Jiang Li with a gentle smile and said, "You should have informed me, otherwise I wouldn't have come empty-handed today. I still owe you a hand gesture." Du Zhong caught the whispers of this group of people in his ear without a word falling. He pinched himself in frustration and cursed himself for not being able to achieve anything without losing. Just as he was about to explain, he heard Jiang Li say, "You don't need to waive the bill, just settle the bill normally." "Isn't it, Jiang Li?" someone complained discontentedly, "We're all classmates, just a free admission. Why are we so stingy?" Dixingta can become famous in the upper class circle, and its consumption level is naturally not affordable for ordinary people. For those who have just worked for a few years or even are still studying for graduate school, it is naturally desirable to have a free opportunity to enter the Dixingta wool harvesting industry. But now he was dispelled by Jiang Li's insightful words. "It's hard not to hold grudges." "Sorry," Jiang Li remained calm and never gave in. Dixingta only offers free benefits to members who spend a certain amount. As if to comply with her words, Du Zhong straightened his back and said, "The boss is right. Do you want to apply for a membership card? With only 150,000 yuan, you can get a chance to apply for a free ticket. Don't miss the chance." "Okay," the merchant smiled and handed a black card to Du Zhong, "then I'll trouble you. Patient deserves to be patient." Lu Wei enthusiastically chuckled at Xingyan, complimenting him with a hint of belittling Jiang Li. "It's not like some great beauty who floats away after eating with a man." Du Zhong took the card with both hands and solemnly asked another waiter to come and register with the company's words. Jiang Li then said, "If you're envious, you can also ask a woman for a bite to eat." Jiang Li lifted her chin slightly, unaware that she had been living with Shanglu for a long time. Du Zhong seemed to see the shadow of Shanglu on her, with thorns all over her body. The difference is that compared to Shanglu, Jiang Li is much more low. Key. Her clear eyes lightly swept over Lu Wei and the men behind him, her voice soft but powerful. "However, there shouldn't be any woman willing to give you a bite, but you can feel wronged and try finding a man," she said. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Lu Wei was furious and couldn't reveal his anger. He raised his fist to greet Jiang Li in the face, but was blocked by Xingyan's hand. Xingyan glanced at Jiang Li twice this time and was surprised by the person who used to only endure being bullied. Now, she is launching her own counterattack. Calm and composed, lukewarm and indifferent, yet as if carrying a knife all over. The mechanical sound of the brain system resounds again. Reminder to the host, the current favorability of the target is 50, which is still the same as last time. The merchant turned to look down at Lu Wei and said, "Today is team building, you shouldn't be angry." "Yeah, today is to clean up the dust for Pei Shen." Li Wei also leaned in between the two at the right time, smiling sweetly as a mediator. "Lu Wei, just hold back for a while and pretend that Jiang Li is joking." As soon as Lu Wei saw Li Wei, his eyes changed and he smiled happily. "Okay, Wei Wei has already spoken. I definitely have to give this face." Li Wei smiled and remained silent, squeezing through the crowd with her high heels and leading the way. Lu Wei hurriedly followed, but turned his head and his eyes were bloodshot, glaring fiercely at Jiang Li. The chubby lips closed and threatened Jiang Li, "You bitch, wait for me." Jiang Li only felt sarcastic. She didn't understand. She was just returning what they said to her to them, and she wasn't angry. What reason do they have to be angry? "Boss, do you want to?" Du Zhong looked apologetic and hesitated to speak. "Don't tell him, I can solve it." Jiang Li looked up and saw a group of people who had already left him and walked away. Without a doubt, he was once again exiled from the group. Just like before, only when they make fun of her will they remember and let her join that group. "You don't have to feel guilty either, it's none of your business," she comforted Du Zhong with a slight smile on her face. "It's them who are bad, and it should be them who should feel guilty. You go ahead and get busy. Thank you for helping to break free today." Du Zhong's heart warmed, and he scratched the back of his head with embarrassment, watching Jiang Li walk away. Finally, he couldn't contain his excitement and took out his phone to give a rainbow fart to his brother group. Sleeping slot brothers, I saw my sister in law today and she even smiled at me. It's so beautiful. I declare myself the #1 loyal fan of my sister. In.law. Song Dynasty. Look at your unremarkable appearance, who doesn't know that sister. In.law looks good when she smiles. Fatty. You didn't just see my sister. In.law laughing, did you? TSK, what a pity, what a pity. Lu Ming doesn't fly. What a pity +1. White eye.jpg. Just as Shanglu picked up his phone and saw such a sentence, he tilted his head and thought carefully. It seemed like he had never seen Jiang Li smile before. At any time, she always had a cold and aloof attitude towards him. Shanglu Bulu. So, have you all seen her smile? It looks great. Song Dynasty. Yes, no one has ever seen my sister. In.law smile, it's simply super beautiful. Fatty guy. No, there's no one who hasn't seen my sister. In.law smile before, right? Shanglu. You have activated the ban on all staff members. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. General Jiang Weiwu. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 10. General Jiang Weiwu. When Jiang Li pushed the door open and entered, there was only one vacant seat left in the private room, undoubtedly reserved for Pei Xingyan, who was going to register. A group of people talked and laughed, laughing uncontrollably. Suddenly, someone looked up at the door and gave a disdainful glance to the people around them, deliberately lowering their voice but still deliberately making everyone hear them. Look, Miss Jiang has come in, why don't you give her a seat? The woman next to her covered her nose and pretended to exaggerate, grinning and saying, then I dare not. The beautiful lady has climbed up the high branch now, how can she please us old classmates give up our seats? Lu Wei tried to please Li Wei for a while but encountered a cold wall. He was not in a good mood at the moment. Looking up and following everyone's gaze, he saw Jiang Li standing at the door preparing to close the door. His plump big hand wiped his chin. He frowned and said, but don't worry, even if Jiang Damei is married, she has a unique taste and has indeed been well developed. Those present are not just inexperienced and ignorant little brats. They can all hear him leaving the yellow chamber with Ginger. The girl with thin skin blushed and silently withdrew from the chat. But more importantly, he persevered with the discomfort in his heart, laughing and echoing the yellowing of these men. We don't know how much that man offered to buy our beloved Jiang Damei, but it has to be said that it's really worth it. Jiang Damei looked at her lack of qi and blood, so she probably worked hard at night. It's not easy to be the boss lady. A group of men burst out laughing with a knowing expression in their hearts. They flicked their index finger and pointed at the man who had just spoken, wearing glasses and looking at him with a serious expression. Or are you a kid with unique eyes? Lying down. Jiang Li, what's wrong with you? Before he could finish speaking, Jiang Li walked up to them in high heels and casually picked up a glass of water with a faint expression, splashing it on them. The cup was filled with ice water, and the ice cubes inside had not fully melted yet. With Jiang Li's splash, he smashed both the ice and water head on. The man wearing glasses was the first to bear the brunt, with the largest area being splashed. However, due to his glasses being smashed onto the ground by ice, his companions stood up and dodged, stepping on them without bias. With a crack sound, the lenses shattered. The man with glasses squinted his eyes and rubbed the cat's waist on the ground for a while, only to find a twisted frame. He immediately stood up in anger and pointed his fingers in front of him, cursing, "Is your mother sick? If she is sick, go get treated quickly, don't her go crazy here." The person who was splashed with a small amount of water saw this and confidently surrounded her, glaring angrily and surrounding her in the center. "Do you really think that if you fly up to the branch and become a phoenix, I can't move you?" Lu Wei rolled up his sleeves with one hand, revealing the fat of his arm. He clenched his fist with one hand and pointed his thumb at his chest. "You go out and inquire about the Crown Prince of Huakai. It's just a Di Shengte. With just one action, I can make it bankrupt. I'm giving you face and making you dare to splash water on me. Huakai. Is it the Huakai that is going to merge with Huaxing recently? Someone exclaimed, if you take the ride with Huaxing, the market value will not be able to rise by chance. TSK, our class is indeed full of great gods, hidden and not leaked. Jiang Li placed the cup back on the table, and a group of people had already gathered behind Lu Wei. As it was not a personal matter, they were all just watching coldly, just like when they were in the hallway just now. No one was willing to come up and lend a helping hand. And she was surrounded tightly by a group of men nearby, with the stench of smoking and alcohol emanating from them, which made her instinctively frown. I'll give you two choices now. Either, after Hua Kai merges with Hua Sheng, I'll take your job. However, Lu Wei thought she was afraid and looked around proudly. The surprise at his identity and the admiration in his eyes made him even more proud. While chatting with the others just now, Lu Wei also learned that Jiang Li is currently working at Huaxing and his malicious eyes are wandering around Jiang Li. Either, wait for Hua Kai to come under Huaxing's banner and stand there obediently, let me throw it back, he said as he spoke. He raised his hand, and just then the man with glasses enthusiastically pushed a pot of water to his side. Lu Wei also knew he couldn't make things too much, but he still had to teach Jiang Li a lesson. Therefore, he touched the hot edge of the water glass and frowned, asking the glasses man to bring the ice water on the other end with ice cubes. A pot full, and you can still hear the sound of ice cubes colliding as you move. If it were all poured on Jiang Li like this, the white T-shirt on her body would definitely stick tightly to her, revealing the traces of the clothes inside. Lu Wei's statement is undoubtedly to make Jiang Li feel embarrassed in public. For a moment, the atmosphere was deadlocked, and Jiang Li's tone was light. You can go to Huaxing and let me try leaving. Yo ha, indeed having a backing is different, Lu Wei mocked with a pretense of surprise, rolling up his sleeves and approaching Jiang Li. Li Wei greeted her with a smile and said, so it's Mr. Lu. Don't be angry either. Jiang Li doesn't know how to speak and is reckless. Just treat her like a fart and let it go. Vivi, it's still you who cares. Lu Wei glanced around her face with a smug expression, and his plump hand suddenly landed on her waist. Li Wei's face changed and she felt nauseous, especially when she lowered her head and could see Lu Wei's face, which was covered in red bumps and even more uneven than the surface of the moon, causing her stomach to churn. She wanted to dodge without leaving a trace. But Lu Wei is a human being who has long seen through her movements. His big hands restlessly caressed her back and slid upwards towards her spinal groove, preventing her from avoiding her. In theory, I should give you face, but as you just saw, she was the one who didn't show any respect for her classmates and started throwing tantrums at others. If I wasn't angry, wouldn't I be too sorry for her? He is the man wearing glasses. You're right, but we're here to welcome Pei Shen today, and it's not good to make a scene too ugly. Li Wei smiled apologetically and looked up to give Yu Hao a wink, wanting her to go out and call someone over. But Yu Hao was scared by Lu Wei's harsh words and stayed in place. He didn't even see the look in her hand, and even if he did, he couldn't understand her meaning. Don't get angry yet. Pei Shen is coming back soon. Let's go sit down first. Li Wei harbored a grudge against him for not being strong enough, but she struggled with him with a smile on her face. With Lu Wei's big hands, she swam around her back, hoping that Pei Xingyan could come back quickly and help her out. Suddenly, a black figure flashed by and took 2 steps forward. A cold but powerful hand grabbed her wrist and forcefully pulled her behind her, then a black shadow flashed through the air, and a loud slap suddenly came from the quiet private room. It's Jiang Li. Jiang Li slapped Lu Wei in the face, and the latter widened his eyes in disbelief. A swollen and red handprint suddenly appeared on his chubby face. Before he could react and fight back, he was kicked hard in his lower abdomen. Lu Wei's figure was unstable, coupled with the smooth floor, and he hit the swivel chair behind him, causing him to fall to the ground with a thud around his clothes corner, turning him upside down. He struggled to stand up, but felt something pressing between his legs, causing spasms in his internal organs and a cold sweat on his forehead. Looking up, it turned out to be Jiang Li. She lifted one foot and stepped on his object with the sharp heel of her red-soled high heels. Her expression was cold and her eyes were faint. At this moment, her hands were clasped around her chest, and she looked down at him from above. She pursed her lips tightly without saying a word, as if there was a merciless killing god hidden in her thin body. End of this chapter.